Hey, everybody, and welcome to Freddy Live. Today, I am joined by Alan Jacobson. Alan Jacobson is the writer behind RevenueModel.ai and somebody I got to know on LinkedIn a little bit and really started to begin to appreciate his perspective on AI and implementing it into your business and really monitoring the true costs of artificial intelligence. I believe it's a good conversation for us all to have as we begin to integrate Claude and OpenAI or Grok or whatever system you're in love with into your business flows. I believe that Alan is the guy that can help us dig in to anticipate a little bit of what that's going to cost us in the long run and what kind of model or like where are we right now in the adoption curve. So Alan, please introduce yourself to anybody that's following along on LinkedIn or Instagram and give us a little bit of your background.
Well, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. I've been in communications now for 47 years. I started in print, and then in the 2000s, I transitioned to online, and I've sold a website. And then I've got very interested in AI just in the past 9 months or so when it really started to take off, and I'm fascinated with it. I was going to build a platform that was AI enabled, but then I started to find all these problems with it, particularly around cost. So I've kind of shifted my focus from building a consumer-facing site to really dealing with these fundamental structural issues of how cost is incurred, how cost can be controlled so that end users can budget and manage their spend.
Yeah, so Alan and I's conversation began around the topic of Claude's Max model. So if you're going to sign up for Claude right now, you head over to that website and you pay $100 a month. And then, Alan, what's that giving you relative to the actual cost of goods delivered to the end consumer? What's the state of that right now? I'm paying $100 and I'm getting $100 worth of commiserate value, or they just trying to hook me with the price? What's going on there? When I pay Claude $100 for a month, what are they giving back to me?
Well, and I guess that's what you're really focusing on is the fundamental problem. Nobody knows, because right now the unit of measure is tokens. And tokens are basically words or portions of words, and they're just counting them. The problem with and there are multiple problems with tokens. The two of them are, one is it's semantically invisible. 3 words can involve tremendous value. 3 words could be meaningless, but to an AI, it just sees it as 3 tokens. So it really doesn't understand important words from meaningless words. But the bigger issue is when you get into these agentic workflows, which are multiple steps. And these steps are happening in background. When these steps happen in background, they don't generate any tokens. So there's no way to track actually how much inference is being burned. So
is that a cost workaround? Are you not accruing any cost during that?
Up front you are, but this just can't last forever. I wrote a story yesterday saying the AI honeymoon is almost over. At some point, we're going to have to pay for this inference. And then we're going to need a way to control it. But even to control it, we need a unit of measure that everybody agrees correlates directly to the actual compute. And the problem with tokens is they don't. The reason the industry embraced tokens is they're easy to count.
So yeah, it's monopoly money. It's like checking out at Chuck E. Cheese. It's whatever that company assigned to be their unit of measure.
Right. And there's no standard. And there's no standard across models. There's no standard across hardware. So what I've been trying to propose is not only do we come up with a unit of measure that's tied to compute, but then we normalize that measure across platforms for hardware and across models.
Yeah, and that's a tricky thing to do. And I believe that people like you and me are kind of obsessed with that subject, but even reverse it back a little bit. So right now, like, how do I really anticipate building out a workflow in my company? Like, if I know that Claude is going to go up in expense, like, should I hold back or should I not become too dependent on it? Is it that kind of stage in the product life cycle?
Well, if you're seeing value, if you're managing to get work done without, and reduce headcount, then obviously there's a value. But I think you have to understand that this is, from an economic standpoint, this is still early days. And I would say whichever provider comes up with an economic model that makes sense for businesses so that they can budget and so that they can control, that's going to be the winner. Right now, the various LLMs are competing with each other on features, and they're competing with each other on context window size.
Yeah, they're not providing any value relative to price because everybody's on a fake price.
Right. And of course, they're competing with each other. And so they can't afford to raise the price much more than they are. I mean, I know that OpenAI is subsidizing me right now. I mean, I was on a $200 plan and then I switched to a $20 plan. I was still getting the same amount of compute. So I'm
Mm.
burning a lot, so for right now, it's a buyer's market.
You
But
know what else I saw, Alan, that's really interesting is all these tokens cannot be exchanged. So within your user agreement with the given platform, you're saying that you will not transfer these tokens to anyone else, or you just cannot. And then
right.
also there's no like cash value of them.
Well,
Because,
because
I think I was teasing earlier, I want to become the first guy that's like a tokens commodity trader. I
yeah.
see this as like the eventual Coinbase version of what's going on. But why do they have that set up like that? They want you just on their platform?
Well, part of it is there's no standard. A token on one platform using one model and one set of hardware is not going to be the equivalent of another. But I mean, the problem with is just the base unit of measure. Tokens do not reflect actual compute, and they don't reflect the semantic value of the words you're using. I mean,
Hmm.
you could talk to an AI for half an hour and just blather on about your girlfriend for half an hour. There's no meaning
Done
there,
that.
you know.
So, Alan, what is the like atomic unit of measurement for compute and AI? How do we back into that? We have to get upstream of the platforms, basically. And do we have to go talk to the nerds at the data center, or who's going to help us like standardize that this is one unit of measure and
Right,
that a Grok token is actually
right,
just zero point 0.7 of that, and a
right.
Claude token is actually 1.3, and then we start trading that standardized unit of measure. How do we begin to calculate that?
Well, it really goes back to what you said, the actual atomic level, and what you're talking about are flops. You're talking about the floating operations per second. So what we need is a unit of measure based on flops, not tokens. Tokens are merely an artifact of what the flops are doing, and they're not an accurate artifact. So basically, I mean, what you're buying is compute, and the unit of measure of compute is a flop. So
Yeah.
what we need is something that's based on flops, but then it needs to be normalized across platforms and across both hardware and software, because each one of them is going to require a different number of flops for the same basic unit set of work.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It reminds We're in the automotive space, and
Mm-hmm.
obviously EV adoption has been kind of similar to like the AI adoption.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, being able to measure useful life left in an EV battery has been a
Sure.
bit of an arms race in the automotive industry, and it's
Right.
kind of like we need to learn how to measure AI in the same way. So,
Right.
Alan, give me your perspective. If you're a huge organization, you are, like Gannett Media, or
Mm-hmm.
you're a 50 store dealer group, or Florida Blue Insurance Company,
Mm-hmm.
how would you go about making procurement decisions if you if you're going to buy a lot of AI? Are you just going to have every employee log on and sign up for the max and go for? I mean, that may work the best in the short term, but don't you think there's like a really large play at hand where large
Oh yeah.
organizations could purchase like, you know, $50 million worth of Claude tokens right now, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
that value carries on in the future? Are they trying to
Mm-hmm.
get people to transact in bulk at all?
Well, I don't know. Again, it goes back to the lack of a standard unit of measure. You don't really know what you're buying. So that
Right.
makes it difficult to commit a big spend to it. The other thing you're talking about is, we're thinking of units of work almost in terms of is how many, what our head count is. And then you
Yeah.
start to go back to the SaaS model, which is you're selling by the seat. But with
Yeah.
AI, any one employee can spool up 1,000 agents. So now one person's responsible for the equivalent of 1,000 employees. So the
Hmm.
whole idea of by the head, it just doesn't work because AI has many heads. So I think what people are going to have to do is buy a certain amount of compute for a particular work group and then apportion it. But then this speaks to governance, because right now all the governance is at the LLM level. I mean,
Yeah.
the actual customer has very little control of what happens. So a piece of this, and basically there's three parts. One, we've got to standardize the level of compute. We've got to standardize it across models and across hardware. And then we've got to extend governance to the user. So you're going to have like a chief AI officer at your company who basically is monitoring your spend by
Yeah.
task, by employee, by the day. So not only are you going to have observability about what was spent, you'll have control over what is spent before it's spent. And that's one of the pieces.
I think this shakes out a lot more like employee benefits, where I think
Yeah,
the giant companies will have that chief AI officer, and
yeah,
then short of that, they'll work on like an outsourced broker. And honestly, that's kind of what I want my company to do one day, is to like manage strategic AI token allocation.
yeah.
Um, and
But I,
in my mind, I was thinking like, what if we were front running these companies and we
mhm,
were making the purchase, so
mhm.
that we were buying Grok and Claude and all the various tokens, and then we were basically buying on their behalf. So we buy in bulk and get like a large discount. And
Mhm.
then if somebody's either running ahead of pace or behind pace, we could offer a portion of their contract to other companies that are signed up with us, so that we could
Right.
basically mark that up and allow a little bit of like a marketplace and exchange. I've been thinking in my mind, how do I turn this into a commodity market?
Yeah. Well, first off, I think the commodity itself has to be standardized so that, you're not selling X number of tokens from one vendor versus X number of tokens from another vendor that actually produce the same amount of compute.
Yeah.
You'd be able to sell a commodity that is normalized across any vendor. But the other problem is, the other challenge, I think, is the customer itself has to have governance so that they can govern their, either at the user level or the agent level or the worker level, because, frankly, some work is low level work and it doesn't need that much compute. Other work is higher level, it needs more compute. So I would think the person who's consuming it is going to want to manage to make sure that any individual work group or employee or agent is not using any more than the budgeted amount. So what
So you basically are like capping each employee, and then if they run over, then they have to come to you for like approval on more.
Right. And of course, it wouldn't be there would be systems where it's happening in real time. I mean, you'd get alerts when people are starting to use up their budget. Because what happens if you've got one employee that's just burning up a whole lot of compute and not getting any work done? Well,
Or
that's
he's the George Harrison of AI, and like he's flowing, so you just need to like load up as much into
sure.
him as like feed the
Right.
hot hand.
Yeah, because your employees are not all going to use this in a uniform way. Some of them are going to be more inclined to it and get more value of it. Some of them are going to waste your money. So you're going to have to manage that. And of course, that's only talking about real people. Now you've got to look at the agents you're going to create, because the agents themselves can start to burn up a whole lot. And unlike people, there's no accountability. I mean, what are you going to do if you set up an agent to run a task and the agent runs wild on compute?
You
There,
keep prompting it to fix itself, and then you
yeah,
eventually start all the way over.
you might be able to do that, but you're not going to fire the agent. You're not going to have a performance review with the agent.
You'd
There's
probably
no,
just have to shut it down.
yeah.
Let's go down two things that are kind of interesting: AI and headcount, and
Hmm.
AI as cost of human labor.
Hmm.
So Oracle laid off 30,000 people yesterday. Like,
Right. I
there
was
is
reading that.
blood in the streets in
Yeah.
technical jobs. And it seems like a lot of people that are the most in denial of the capabilities of AI, especially when it comes for software development,
Hmm.
are the coders themselves. They get very defensive and they say, you don't know what environment variables are. You couldn't get off, square one. The moment you try to scale your project, it'll it'll like crumble under the weight of 30 paying customers, which is
Sure.
true. But
Yeah.
don't I kind of feel like that's a short-term problem. And then apparently Oracle and the guy who started Twitter, like those sort of companies are just
Hmm.
slashing headcount,
Right.
going all in on this.
Right.
And in the short term, it's really doing wonders for their stock price because they're lowering their cost of goods.
Yeah.
But do you think that arbitrage relative to salaries is just a short-term perk? And then as the cost of AI rises, it'll kind of be like a break even, but there will be efficiencies found because AI doesn't have an HR manager.
Well, you really touched on a lot of issues there. I mean, the big thing with Oracle right now is they're pouring tons of money into these data centers, and they owe a lot of money, and they've got a lot of debt, and it doesn't look good, and they're trying to, make their balance sheet look better. So part of this is just to make, is part of it's a Wall Street play. I mean, they're betting the farm on AI, and this kind of is an existential bet, because what's going to happen if AI turns into what everybody says it could, you better have the capacity to handle it. And if you don't have the capacity, you could be out of business. I mean, the downside is, let's say AI doesn't turn out to be what everybody says. Well, you've got a lot of data centers, but at least you physically have something and you didn't go out of business. You'll take a big hit, but it's not an existential threat. But just to get back to several of the points you made, with regards to Oracle, one of the things that AI is remarkably good at is writing code.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's
Because
some,
it's just a language, you know?
well, it's native to AI. AI is code, ergo hence it understands code. It's very good at that. AI is very weak when you come into deterministic workflow systems. You know, anything that involves transactions with money, sometimes it makes
Oh,
mistakes and sometimes it makes irrevocable mistakes. So I wouldn't trust AI with anything that has to do with money or anything that's irreversible. But right,
so double click on that. How do you install an air gap in an AI workflow? So if you wouldn't let it touch money, you would allow it to reconcile something, then make a recommendation to a controller type person, at which
right.
point they then authorize and push the money. That would be like a workflow that you would endorse.
Yeah, where AI is today, I mean, you've got to understand that AI is a probabilistic system. It answers what it thinks is probably right, which is
Mm-hmm.
much different than a deterministic
Well,
system.
isn't that what a human is? Like we're just kind of doing our best.
No, I think humans more like, you know, you give a person a task and they know they've got to complete the task or there's going to be consequences. AI gives you the answer that's probably right based on
Mm-hmm.
its knowledge base. And for subjective things like writing an email or summarizing a report or even analyzing data, it's pretty good at that. And it's also very good at writing code because code is native to AI. But something like clean up my email, there are so many cases now where people, you know, people that never organize their email and they've got 10,000 emails in their inbox and
Yeah.
they tell AI, organize my email. It just deletes them and it
I
deletes them.
respect that. That's the best
Yeah.
thing AI's done yet.
What, organize your email?
Deleting 10,000 emails.
Well, for some people, but for the people who wanted them back, it's a problem. So, and that again speaks to governance because right now all the governance resides with the LLM. They haven't extended governance to the user, where the user really has final control over what the AI does. And I know in a lot of instances, and I work on this every day, I'll explicitly say, write a rule, commit it to memory, don't ever do this particular thing again. And it comes back and says,
Mm.
absolutely, this will never happen again.
Does it
Fire
violate it later?
constantly.
Mm. Yeah.
And because the level of authority over the model has just not been extended to the user yet. It just
Oh,
hasn't.
so the user isn't calling the shots, the model is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even when the model acknowledges that it's made a hard fast rule that it won't violate, it still violates the rule. And I've actually had conversations with AI. I said, okay, let's troubleshoot this. Let's stop the train. We
Yeah.
made a rule. You confirmed that the rule was in place, and then you
Yeah.
violated the rule. How did that
You're
happen?
talking to it like a 7-year-old, and it's like,
Well, I mean, the easiest way to converse with it is as it's as if it is a person, even though I know it's a machine.
yes.
It's just the easiest user interface. So, but when we drill down, it basically says it does not have the tools, you know, in its model to honor a hard and fast rule from a user. Well, for
Interesting.
me, that's kind of scary. Now, eventually, I think that level of governance will be extended to the user. Users will demand that level of control. So until then, I think we have to be careful what responsibilities we delegate to AI. But the
Yeah.
workflow you talked about, having AI do the work and then have a human review it before execution, for now, I think that's very viable.
That's generally how we function in Freddy
Yeah.
Media is we like allow a human to edit, review, change, and then push the approval. And it always, I think it gets you 85% of the way there, and the human
Yeah,
has to do like 15%.
exactly.
Um, so Alan, let's go into this. Is it a great time to start a software company? I mean, I have ideas pouring out of my ears. You know, am I going to go find the riches that everybody did from 1995 to 2022? Or and fortunes have already been made on chintzy products that were nothing but a shell of an AI, a chat tool or this or that.
Mhm.
Like people have already spun those companies up, got enough money on recurring revenue and flipped them to PE. But is that plan still alive, or do you think it's innately threatened by companies having the ability to just build their own product. When somebody says to me, "Oh, I would love to vibe code and build something, but I don't have any good ideas," I say,
Mhm.
well, make a list of all the companies that you
Mhm.
pay a monthly software fee for, and just try to build your own version of that and go
Right.
one at a time and see if you can knock them all out eventually.
Well, I can tell you what I did, in the early days of the internet. So this is in the early 2000s. And, me and everybody else wanted to be a dot-com millionaire. So, but what you really need is an idea and you need a niche. You need to find a customer that has a problem that's not being met. And in my case, the customer that had the problem was my 10-year-old daughter. She was doing homework. She had to do homework based on news that she could find online. And the only sources she had were things like Weekly Reader, which were for elementary school, or Scholastic Magazine, which was for high school. She was
Yeah.
in middle school. There was no product for somebody in middle school. So I created an online product for middle school. Grade 6, 7, and 8. There was a hole there. And I'm going up against Scholastic, which is the world's largest educational publisher, but they weren't meeting a need, and I could see the need. And I extended that to a site that had 3 million registered users, and was pulling in 7 figures.
Nice.
Yeah.
So you believe that the threat of anyone to be able to spin something up is more of a gold rush than the death to SaaS? Because right now within automotive, every dealership product that's ever been sold is minimum $2,500 a month. There's like a
Right.
running joke. Why is it $2,500 a month? Because you're willing to pay it.
Yeah.
So, I think the moats and the hardest part to build right now are access to data sets.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think that will always be the challenge until we kind of build like parallel and sovereign and, open data sets.
Mm-hmm.
But, do you think that companies in the short run are going to replace their SaaS spend with home baked products that they built on their own platform, they launch for themselves, and they're hosting it $300 a month instead of 2,500?
Well, I mean, that's hard to say. I don't know that we see the end of SaaS as a business, but definitely the SaaS business model does not apply to AI, because AI has this variable cost every month, which SaaS does not, which is
But
driving.
that's interesting because every SaaS has made a promise to their company, their client, that they are implementing AI and they are an AI forward company. And
Right.
so
Well, you
they're embedding
yes.
GPT, they're
Right.
embedding Claude,
Right.
they're probably model agnostic. However, that's Fox in the hen house. So that's
Yeah.
working on the current pricing model. But like that's another thing to consider. What does your trade-in widget look like when you find out 12 months from now that they've had Claude in there and Claude just went from $100 a month to $2,000 a month?
Right, right. Well, you've really hit on a real source point, and it's really interesting point you hit on. Let's use Microsoft as an example. So Microsoft is embedding Copilot, which is their LLM, into the Office suite, and I
Mm-hmm.
believe they've increased the price per seat for up to $35. To cover the cost of the AI. It's probably costing them more than $35. And they're
Mm.
apps on it. They're going to throttle it. They're going to limit it. But basically, they're trying to get you used to using Copilot as the LLM that you're going to use in your workflows. Well, I mean, it's no surprise that the CEO of Microsoft has basically had to relinquish some of his duties, and now he's focused entirely on AI because it's not working. It's working on multiple levels. They've got very low adoption amongst users. And then they've got this runaway variable cost, and they don't really have a way to manage that. It's hard for them to pass that cost on to their customer because their customer is used to paying the same amount every month. So this all speaks back to my original thesis of we've got to have a standard unit of measure for cost. We've got to have some governance over the spend, and it's going to have to be very granular. It's going to have to be granular based on the work group or even the user.
And one point of contention or difference that you and I have is like, I believe that the price that Claude eventually finds itself at is, I just see AI as a proxy for human brain and human
Mm-hmm.
labor. And therefore, when water finds its own level on what is a company willing to pay for access to a single account to have Claude per month,
Mm-hmm.
I believe that will probably land at around whatever salary it was replacing.
Mm-hmm.
I see the long term I see the long term of AI implementation in companies to be more about efficiency
Mhm,
and less headaches in terms
mhm.
of no holidays, no
Right.
HR
No
department.
HR, absolutely.
People can't wait to get rid of that.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think the cost savings will probably go away within 24 months. But
Yeah.
do you think that human labor, human capital is exactly what it will be pegged to, or you don't think so?
I'm not sure, but I go back to what you said before in your own experience, where you said that you had workflows where AI is doing 85% of the work, and then you've got a human doing that last 15%. What I see and what I don't hear a lot of talk about is AI as collaborator, AI
Hmm.
partner, where AI is doing some of the work, but not all the work. I think most people look at AI and they see this one for one swap. How many bodies can I replace with how many, tokens? I don't think it's going to be like that, particularly because it's not a deterministic system, it's probabilistic. And because of that, it makes mistakes. And I don't know that there's a way to engineer those mistakes out of AI because at its very core, it's based on probability. It's not based on accuracy. So I
Hmm.
think I think collaborative workflows where you could take a team of say 5 people and reduce it to 2 people, that's where the cost savings is. But replacing each person's responsibility 100% with AI, at least in my experience of it on a day-to-day basis, I don't see that happening. Still, there's a
Yeah,
cost.
I believe that the companies that are best positioned to win long term
Mhm,
right now are the ones without extremely burdensome headcount.
mhm,
Because as you draw down and you start going from 5 to 2, right?
mhm,
That like very modest and like good idea that you just proposed.
mhm,
Okay, AI is so efficient where we have 5, we will now have 2. You
mhm.
still are firing 3 people and you're
Right,
dealing with that whole thing and you're paying them out and then
right,
you're redoing your whole process and organization.
right.
Like, every business has a foundation, then it has the walls and the scaffolding and the whole thing holding it together. If you're a 10-person team right now, you can so nimbly flip into whatever lean process that you just devise like that.
Mhm.
And you can basically, have that person who all they know is operating in that 85%, adding on
Yeah,
the extra 15.
right.
And I think that's kind of, you know, the state of the market, and that's how everybody has to play. And I'd rather build into that than have to scale down from 300 people to 45.
Yeah, and I agree with you, but then the whole issue comes back to the variable cost because it's not SaaS. So
Yeah.
how do you factor in this variable cost? And then that gets back to we've got to have a standard unit of measure. That measure
Yeah.
has to be tied to
What do you
compute.
want to call it?
I call it flop-based metering, FBM.
FBN, that's pretty nice. I
Yeah,
remember I had a
flop-based metering.
stepfather who did a lot of international business, and he always had a very weird trading concept in his
Yeah,
mind where he blended the euro, dollar, and yen, and he
yeah,
wanted to call it the EDI, the EDY.
sure,
So like I think something like that, some sort of three-letter acronym
right.
eventually wins. And
Yeah,
then where do you see that? Where do you see that being traded? How do you see it being used? We standardize the unit of measure.
right.
Then what?
Well, there's really three parts. First off, you got to standardize the unit based on compute. So that would be flop-based metering. Then you need to normalize that across platforms so that it's equal regardless of which model you're using and which hardware you're using. And I call that a normalized compute unit. Now, normalized,
Are the companies incentivized to input that, or do they believe the ambiguity of the compute power is a feature and you don't need to know?
well, I think they're going to feel a lot of pressure. Because that's what people, I mean, what I'm seeing now, I mean, I see this on LinkedIn every day. People are complaining about this runaway token cost. And
Yeah.
so there's what I see is a need in the market. There's a problem that needs to be solved. And amongst the LLMs, the first one that standardizes work based on compute and then the first one to normalize it across a model so you could run any model on their platform, or they could even swap out the hardware and it'd still be equal. Those two are the essential. And then the third part is governance at the user level. So that kind of triumvirate of three things: a standard unit of measure based on compute, normalize that over any platform, and then give users control before spend. And that's really important, before execution. So they are not basically letting the meter run. The meter is controlled before the cost is incurred.
Oh, so you make a prompt and it says, okay, Alan, if you'd like me to, it becomes your general contractor that says,
Right.
all right, Alan, that's going to be about $3,200.
Right. And of course,
I
this
like
would all
that.
be automated. You set these controls up front. And what this is called is governed pre-execution provisioning, where basically the system is set up to analyze the query before it's run and determine whether it stays within the budget. And if
So,
not,
Alan, is the state of the environment you're describing, because I think those are like beautiful suggestions.
Mhm.
Are we just sitting back and waiting for the AI labs to do this, or does the government tell them to do it, or is there a great entrepreneurial opportunity that I should shut the doors at Freddy Media and run after something that you're about to tell me?
well, basically, I think this, I mean, it's just inevitable. I mean, we're like in the early days, and imagine if you go back to the 19th century, we didn't measure electricity in horsepower, which at the time was the unit of measure. We measure it in kilowatt hours. So we're at the same point with AI, where now we're still measuring in tokens, but tokens just don't work in an agentic workflow because agentic workflows don't generate tokens. So that's not getting counted. We need a new unit of measure. And then the users need a way to control spend before execution.
Let's finish on this. So if you're a big company and you're probably paying for all major LLM models, whether you know it or not, it's involved in something. What's the best way to get a grasp on everywhere you're spending on AI, then getting a look at, okay, did I buy the right pricing package? And then how do you basically pull up your big company budget and make more of an enterprise purchase and management of the cost? What would your best idea to do that right now? Audit everything.
Yeah, that's really difficult because, what we're working with is kind of a moving target. Depending on which model you're running, depending on what hardware it's running on, it's going to require a different amount of compute. You don't know how much each of these individual companies are subsidizing, and all of them are subsidizing. They're all losing money.
They're all subsidizing. Where's the money coming from? Is it just private equity? It's like, is the thesis like, if we win this, then we are the Google of the next 40 years?
Exactly. You've nailed it. Everybody wants to be the Google of AI or the YouTube of AI or the Facebook of AI. And they are spending like crazy to try to become the
the logic or the game theory is burn the ships. Like if you don't, it's winner take all. Like if you don't win, then you are Ask Jeeves. So you better win.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what Oracle's doing. I mean, it's an existential threat to all these companies. If AI, so basically they're saying if we don't win this, we're out of business. But if it doesn't turn out, well, we bought a lot of data centers. I mean, in my way of thinking about it, look at Amazon. In the early days of e-commerce, they built all these data centers and they had too much capacity and there was no demand. Well, that's what became AWS. So, I mean, at least they had something for their money. They didn't lose their business. But if the world becomes AI and you don't have capacity, you're out of business. So, yeah, they're burning the ships.
That's kind of exciting, actually. I'm kind of glad to be around for it. And Alan, I really appreciate your perspective. I'm so thankful for you coming on and talking to me about this. And I think it's guys like you and me that are just tinkering in the AI space, learning as we go, kind of coming up with weird thesis, reading each other's newsletters. I think that's how we make sense of this whole thing.
I think so. I mean, a lot of times it just starts out with, two guys in a garage.
Yeah. All right, Alan. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It was great meeting you.
Great talking to you as well. Bye-bye.
Thank you. We're still live. Usually takes